Instead of focusing on what happened to me, started to focus on what have I overcome that has shaped me into who I am today.
Welcome back to Absolutely Abundant, a podcast for soul line creatives. My name is Julie Getzinger, and on this podcast, I interview guests who are living an abundant life to hear how they did it, and will be sharing personal stories from my own life to show how following your intuition can lead to a life beyond your wildest dreams. Today on the show, we have Danielle Cobo, who is the author of Unstoppable Grit: Break Through the 7 Roadblocks Standing Between You and Achieving Your Goals. This is episode 37, and we will be talking about how to find grit and resilience within yourself while going through challenging times. Before we dive into this conversation, I would love it if you would hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. This is the best way to make sure we can stay in touch so you can receive more stories of inspiration to remind you of your power to live a life of absolute abundance. Let's welcome our guest, Danielle Cobo. So welcome, Danielle.
Thanks for having me on the show. I'm so excited to be here.
Yay! So happy to have you with us today. I'm going to share a little bit about Danielle before we dive into the interview here. So Danielle is a former Fortune 500 senior sales manager who is renowned for empowering individuals with the grit, resilience, and courage to thrive personally and professionally. She is the author of Unstoppable Grit: Break Through the 7 Roadblocks Standing Between You and Achieving Your Goals, and is the host of Unstoppable Grit podcast. An acclaimed speaker and thought leader, Danielle's life and work epitomize grit and resilience. And I am especially excited today because I know Danielle personally, and she's helped me so much in my own life, personally and professionally, and really is so authentic and is exactly like she embodies this so well. She's helped me through the hardest times in my life without doubt. And I am always in awe of your focus, your consistency, your loyalty, and your own resilience. So I'm so honored to have you here.
Well, the feeling is mutual. I'm grateful for the friendship that has developed over the years. The fact that we met at a conference and have been able to build this beautiful relationship and friendship over the year and get to be in contact consistently.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I wanted to start with, what's an example of a time in your own life when you had to have grit and resilience?
It would be hard to narrow it down to one particular time. I believe that in many of our lives, there's several different situations and hardships and challenges that we endure that shape the type of person that we are today. So I would say earlier in my life, when I was 17, my mom and I had a tumultuous relationship where, in a lot of ways, I respected my mom. She was a role model to me. She was somebody that embodied tenacity and grit and resilience and determination because she was a single mom and we did not grow up with much. And I saw her go from nothing to rising the corporate ladder in the pharmaceutical industry and becoming one of the top female managers for a top 10 pharmaceutical company. And so in many ways, I aspired to be just like her. And then I also found out at the early age of 15, when I met my father for the first time, that my mom had taken me from my father. And I never got the opportunity to meet him until I was 15. So I grew up thinking that I wasn't loved, that I wasn't worthy, and it created a lot of insecurities and guardedness deep down inside of me that in many ways I used that as a protective shield to protect me, but it was also really hard to get to know me. And I believe that time period when I was 17 and I was kicked out of my house from my mom and I got in a disagreement, that really was a pivotal moment that started me in developing grit. Because I remember going to the school counselor the next day, and the school counselor told me, if you don't go back home and make amends with your mother, then you're never going to amount to anything in life. And I remember just thinking in that moment, who are you to define what I am capable of? You have no idea what's going on at home and the unhealthy environment that I was in. And I remember at that moment of saying, only I have the ability to define how I'm going to show up, what I'm going to accomplish in life, and what I'm going to work towards. And I ended up graduating high school. I worked full time while in high school, ended up going to college, worked 2 jobs in college, funded my whole college. and have built a very successful career in corporate. And so I believe if there's any message to share, it is that you are in control of your own life and your own destiny, and it's up to you to write that story.
Wow. And so at the age of 15, you started on this path. It sounds like of really developing grit and resilience and trusting yourself. I'm hearing so much in this story, the power of deciding I choose how I live my life. And that makes so much sense as to how I see you now, this beautiful, confident, strong, successful woman. And it's interesting where you came from, where you started, because people might look at you and think like, oh, she's got it easy, or look at her, she's so beautiful, it must be easy for her. I know people make judgments like that just looking at us. And your story is such a real, raw story. And I'm just so in awe of how much you share and that you wrote a book about this as well. And can you tell us about your decision to share this with the world? How is that releasing this real story to the world?
I had never imagined writing a book. In fact, I thought that I was going to spend my career in corporate. And it happened to be that in 2019, my husband had served a year deployment in Iraq. And at the time, our twin boys were 2 years old. I was traveling 60% of the year. I was very grateful that I had my in-laws close by who were able to help me with my boys while I traveled. So I was very grateful for that. So the time came in 2020 where my husband had returned home from a deployment, which 2 weeks prior to him coming home, his base was hit by 13 missiles. So the gratitude of him coming home and coming home safe was right there. It was a very emotional journey when he was coming home. And I just remember the moment when he said, I'm on the plane, I'm coming home. I just remember breaking out in tears. I was at my national sales meeting. And I thought him being deployed was difficult.
Mm.
But I have to say that that transition with him coming home was a lot more challenging than I anticipated. He and I were two very different people after the deployment. He had served in war. He had seen things that most people don't see. I was used to being very independent, making all the decisions for our family and the parenting decisions of the boys. And we had to find a way to come back together and to rebuild. And it took time, and we're still working through it. I think it's always going to be evolving as a military family. But right as we started to find our rhythm, March 8th, I lost my mom, and I lost my mom unexpectedly to suicide. And that moment of hearing the news and just collapsing to the ground, and tears flooded my face and down my cheeks, I just couldn't believe that somebody was hurting so much that they felt that the only decision that they could make was to take their life. Now, I will say my mom and I had an estranged relationship for 13 years, so I wouldn't say that we were very close, but she was still my mom. She was still somebody that I loved and cared about. Unfortunately, she did suffer from mental health. And right as I was working towards trying to find a way to cope with what had just taken place, March 13th, the pandemic hit. The world shut down. So I wasn't even able to go home and do a celebration of life for my mom, wasn't able to even go through the healing process of sorting through her things. Everything I had to do remotely. And there was the uncertainty of the pandemic, and my kids are immune compromised with respiratory issues. So there was a lot of fear and anxiety during that time period. And then the company that I was with was acquired by another organization. It became a very toxic work environment. And I ended up leaving the organization after 7 years. Now, all of this took place in 6 months. And I had tied my identity to my paycheck, my job title, the fact that I was a Fortune 500 senior sales manager. I had tied my identity to this. But deep down inside, I wasn't happy. I wasn't fulfilled. And it took some discovery, some reflection, some self-discovery, a lot of therapy, and some exercises to redefine what success was to me and how I wanted to show up in the world. And I wrote the book because I realized that there are a lot of people out there that are going through similar circumstances. They may not have gone through the exact circumstances that I went through, but they've probably gone through something similar. Or maybe they have gone through the exact circumstances. And I wanted to provide people with the resources, with the tangible advice and practical steps that they could take to apply in their life. And I believe that when we have the tools and we have the knowledge to break through some of the roadblocks that are holding us back, then we really can build a career and a life that we love.
Wow. Are you ready to break through to the next level of success in your business? If so, you'll want to check out our Abundance Breakthrough Retreat. You can expect to leave our retreat with a supportive belief system, knowing that you can enjoy a life of absolute freedom and abundance, a more clear understanding of your divine mission and path of purpose, a 90-day action plan to meet your specific business goals, and a supportive community that will cheer you on every step of the way. Following our retreat, we'll have the opportunity to join our Free to Fly program to receive ongoing business, mindset, and personal life support. Check out what Kay had to say about our retreat. Julie knows how to get to the heart of what's getting in her way using deep intuitive guidance. She has helped me tell my clients the truth about how they bring their magic and must do the work to see the results. Julie's approach is fun, direct, and a noble style that brings intuitive coaching to a whole new level. Since participating in our Abundance Breakthrough program last year, my business income increased last year by 67%. Thank you, Julie. Kay Lowfrey, licensed nutritionist. To learn more, go to juliegetzinger.com or set up a complimentary call with her by going to the link below. Can you share some tips? Like, what if someone is going through it right now and maybe like you, it's like one thing after the next, and they're just like, when is this going to end? When is my break? Why me? They're in that dark place. What can they do to pull themselves out of that? What would you share with them?
I think that it's really important to understand that we all are going to go through challenges in life. And sometimes it's going to make sense and sometimes it's not going to make sense. And maybe it doesn't make sense today, but it makes sense eventually down the road. I remember a time where my husband and I were trying for 3.5 years to have kids. And I could not figure out, like, why am I not able to have kids? We ended up doing IVF. And looking back, I'm grateful that we went through that journey, because if we would have conceived in the time that we tried, I was living in Alabama. I was traveling 250 nights a year. I was away from family because we were doing military training there. And when I ended up conceiving, we lived in Tampa, Florida. I wasn't traveling as much. And it happened to be that it was right around the time that my in-laws retired and they wanted to move out to California, and they end up living down the street from us now, and they live in Florida. So sometimes it doesn't make sense in those moments of why it's happening then, but it may make sense in the future. I am a believer, and so I do believe that God has a plan for us, and sometimes his plan is greater than we can imagine. But ultimately, if we follow his direction, then he will guide us to the direction that he wants us to go.
Beautiful. Oh, and how do you define success now? You talked about before you were working in this Fortune 500 company and had all the things that people think are successful. But how have you redefined success as an entrepreneur in the work that you're doing now?
So one of the exercises that I talk about in the book, and I'll share with you today, is I went through a two-step series, two steps. One of them is I really didn't know who I was, or I thought I knew who I was, but I didn't know how I was showing up in the world. And so I went on Facebook one day and I said, if there's 3 words to describe me, how would you describe me? And my comments were flooded with words like empowering, driven, motivated, inspiring, gritty, resilient. And I kept thinking, like, why are people seeing this in me, but why am I not seeing it in myself? So then the next step I did was I started to think about all the challenges that I had gone through and what steps that I took to overcome it. And instead of focusing on what happened to me, started to focus on what have I overcome that has shaped me into who I am today. Going from blaming to owning how it has contributed to who I am today, a resilient, driven, motivated person. If I didn't go through those challenges, I may not have those characteristics that I do today. And so just acknowledging the challenges for what they were, and also acknowledging how they are showing up in how we are today. And the third step is I wrote my own obituary, which is a very interesting introspective type exercise. But I wrote it from the perspective of a colleague, and then I wrote it from a perspective of a family member. And ultimately, what I learned from that experience is when it comes to that time where it's time for us to pass, people are not going to remember you for this amazing job title that we have. They're not going to remember us for the paycheck that we earned. We're not going to remember for the awards that we earned. We're going to be remembered for how we made people feel. And so when I start to think about what does success mean to me, I think about what do I want my kids to say when it comes time for my passing? That I was loving, that I was supportive, that I was always there for them, that they felt comforted when they needed it. That's how I define success. I define success based off of how do I make people feel and how do I feel deep inside and at the core of who I am? And when you understand what your core values are and you're making decisions based off of the alignment of your core values, that's when you can really be successful.
Wow. And it feels like you learned different things about life from your mom passing earlier. Because most people don't think about what's on their obituary. Most people are thinking, like, what do I need to get done today? What are my deadlines? But to really take that perspective of what would my loved ones say about me? What would my colleagues say about me? That really helps to put it into perspective, why we're here, what's important to us, what our values are. I love that exercise, and I'm excited to do that myself. I think that's really an amazing tip. And I'm curious if you think, like you said before, we're all going to go through challenges in life, right? But why, and this is maybe a bigger question, a philosophical question. Why do some of us go through more than others? Do you believe it's because our soul wants to go through bigger growth, or is it something that just happens?
I wish I knew the answer to that, but why somebody gets cancer, why somebody doesn't. I mean, we can go down to maybe the food we eat or the lifestyle we live, but sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with that. I don't know the answer to that. I know that each of us experience hardship and challenges. And I think that's really important to not compare our hardships to each other by looking at somebody and going, wow, I've been through nothing compared to that particular person. They had it way harder than me. No, because then that diminishes our hardships. I think it's important that we acknowledge them and just know that we all go through different hardships at different phases in our life. And if I knew the answer to why it happens, I'm sure it would solve a lot of problems, but it's the best I could give.
Yeah. And as far as writing a book, like you were talking about, we all have a story. Do you think writing a book is something that you would recommend people to do? Like, how did you get started on that journey?
I would absolutely recommend writing a book. I believe that a big portion of my healing process, I'm here today and I'm able to speak about those experiences, and people go, how did you go through all that and still be peppy and happy? Well, I wasn't like that when I was going through it. In fact, there was many times where I had panic attacks and I felt like I couldn't breathe and I felt confined, and the anxiety would be so overwhelming that I would burst out in tears unexpectedly. But what I found through writing a book is it was very therapeutic. I was able to put into words how I was feeling. And I worked with a developmental editor who really pushed me to go deep inside and come up with original thoughts and ideas. The flow of the book is I share a story and then I share the lessons that were learned and then how the reader can apply it into their life. So it's very much so I want the reader to walk away going, okay, I now have tangible tools that I can take away to apply into my life. And going through that exercise of writing a book, I was able to really narrow down of what were the specific steps that I took and what did I specifically do? Why am I able to quickly bounce back and maybe some people aren't? Well, it's because of these different coping mechanisms and healing mechanisms that I've done over the years that have helped me. And that's what inspired also writing the book and sharing it with the readers. So I would believe that if someone is able to write a book, I would absolutely do it. It's a fun experience. It took me a year to write the book and I dedicated a lot of time to it. I also wrote a really long book, but I had apparently had a lot to say.
And I am so freaking excited to read your book. And where can people find it? Where can they find you and stay in touch with you?
The book is available at the retailers, so Barnes and Noble, but most people are picking it up on Amazon. So they can purchase the book today and pre-order it. If they go to my website, when they pre-order the book, they can download a free courageous goal setting guide. So there's actually some free resources that I have if they pre-order the book and then go to my website, but they can always order it on Amazon and it will arrive the week of February 21st.
Nice. So exciting. And I will put the links below in the show notes so you all can check out the links below. Danielle, thank you so much for being with us today. I am so proud of you for everything that you've done, and I'm so honored to have you as my friend too.
Oh, well, the feeling is mutual. Thank you so much for having me on your show today.
Thank you.
I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy it, please consider liking it. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, go ahead and do that now. If you know of anybody else who could benefit from watching this video, share it with them too. And thanks for being here. I hope to see you soon. Bye.